thank you very much, Ash, for your contribution. I think it's lovely, can I say first, to be back here again. I had the honour and the privilege of, when I was Taoiseach Prime Minister, of being here and had my few moments in the sun were to be able to speak here. So that was a great honour. It's a long time back since I linked up with Mark and the cultural diplomacy, and it was a time perhaps when things were a bit more peaceful. You'll remember, Mark, we had a very successful conference in Berlin when at the time they were celebrating one of the early anniversaries of the wall coming down, and everywhere was full of confidence about how we could develop on peace and security and find new ways of working together. And I'd been involved in the enlargement of the European Union for a number of years. I was culminated in the Irish presidency during 2004, when we had the Ireland of the welcomes and 10 new countries joined the European Union, and everything looked very bright and rosy and confident. And I think cultural diplomacy played a big part in that, because I think what Mark and colleagues were trying to do is to say it was more just than the diplomatic missions. It was more just than foreign affairs departments, which we all know are so vital, but it was a way of extending that out into the broader society. And I think a lot of good work was done in doing that, pulling in people from, as you said, presiding officer, of sport and entertainment and to the world. Because the reality of the world we all live in, it's very hard for, in democracy, it's very hard for democracy full stop. I think it's a battle all the time to try and convince people that what we all do is the right thing. And you've almost a battle between autocracy and democracy going on all over the place when you read your newspapers or read your social media. But I think cultural diplomacy gives a real chance where young people can get themselves involved in a different way. They see the power and they see the interest in this. And you see the gathering of huge music conferences, and you've had it here for the last few months in Edinburgh. But that brings young people into a different way, and if they can get a positive image and a positive way that this is a good thing, that music and song and a bit of politics mixed in, and politicians moving around them in a way that isn't so in your face as maybe other times, then I think there's huge benefits in that. So I think if we're to build and develop our democracies and try and bring a new generation with us and show that what we've been doing most of our lives around this table, and many colleagues are still doing, then I think cultural diplomacy is really a good way of doing it. And I just hope that the movement as it was some years ago can continue to evolve and develop, and that we can win over support of the rising generation who do see things differently. They are not people who know too much about the Second World War. They think that is very interesting to watch in books and films, but not too interested in how it all changed the world. And they're not too interested in how the European Union came together either, or about who's in or who's out. That isn't something that attracts them. They probably are interested in what the President of America is doing, because it's a bit hard to dodge that. But for any of us, even though he's missing for the last 2 days, which might be a good or a bad thing. But anyway, so I think we have to work hard on our young people to try and show them. And I think the best way of doing that, or not the only way, because parliamentary democracy is crucial, as you've been at all day, presiding officer, but I think also trying to attract a young and rising generation that diplomacy is important, that culture is important, that internationalism is important. And I hope that what a lot of us have spent our lives doing can be developed in this way. And I think the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy has played a good role in that. It has brought people together. It has pulled many excellent conferences. Of some I've participated, some I've watched their from a distance, but they have, and we've built friendships. We've built friendships in other ways that wouldn't have been possible. I've spent most of the last 15 or so years involved in conflicts. And as Sir David said earlier on, you're never out of work when you're involved in conflicts, because there's 27 horrendous ones going on today when we sit here, one worse than the other. And we see some of them on television, others we don't see at all. I spent several hours last week with people on the ground, mainly women in Sudan, explaining what's happening. A few weeks back before the holiday break, we spent time under Rwanda, what's happening on the border with the Congo. And they're the ones that you don't see on TV every day. And, you know, it's all depressing, but if we all just get depressed, that won't do anything. That doesn't, it's easy to get depressed. Somebody said earlier on, people are turning off their televisions. Well, it might be truer to say they're putting their foot through it. But it is that way because people feel hopeless. But we can't allow that happen. I think we have to be trying to find ways of looking for solutions, trying to find ways of peacefully moving on. And as I know from conflict in Ireland I've been involved in for decades, that it doesn't mean people will love each other, because they won't. But at least if you can get people to use their energies in political ways and ways of trying to find new solutions, then we can make a big impact on the world. And I think we have to try and convince world leaders to that. I strongly believe in multilateralism. I think it's becoming a bad word now, unfortunately. But the tide does turn, the road does turn. The only way we're going to solve the problems of the world, we might never solve them all, but at least if we could solve some of them, is by people working together, participating together, interacting with each other, trying to understand each other's points of view. If we don't do that, we'll get nowhere, and the world will go back to the barbaric times of ancient past. But I do believe, and it's an honour to be here, and a privilege to be here. We thank you, Presiding Officer, for your time. We had a very interesting debate, which I came in on for today, on women in politics, and I think that's crucial. Sometimes in Ireland we've brought in the quota system, which is helping, but we're still way behind. And I do acknowledge that, and I do acknowledge the efforts. But funny, there's a lot of progress made in other ways, and our embassy staff now is 50-50. Boardrooms numbers now are totally, even men's sports actually have women on the board tables, which they had to be dragged and pulled to, but they're now doing it, and the sports haven't closed down. So there are big wins. Women in politics is a tougher issue, I think. As long as we have the system of clientism, that you get elected based on how efficient you are and looking after your constituents, which happens to be the way it is and should be, it's hard for women to be to make strides. But I do think there were some good suggestions today. So I want to thank Mark, and I want to thank you for having us. I think the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy is playing a very valuable and useful role, and even in a difficult world that we're in at the moment, and it is a difficult world at the moment, I think it plays a useful role.